remarking my bartending, I even thought it might have been the soul of my friend Jim Pike come back from the dead. And I don't exclude the possibility either, Charles. I'm not willing to exclude the possibility that Jim Pike came back to me as his son Jimmy came back to him, because it had a tremendous interest in early Christian theology and in Zoroastrianism, which Jim Pike had confessed to me once he believed was probably the true religion. It was very versed in Zoroastrianism and knew a great deal about the Essenes and the therapeutic.
Hey, dickheads! Like a pink laser beam of truth beaming straight from all over the world to your brain hole. We've got our Sogum tubes jammed up our butts. We're ready to take the food in and puke it back out and do a show for you. So this time it's Counterclock World. And boy, this should be an interesting episode. It's also going to be...
They want to disgorge.
Yes. And we've got a special guest with us today. Coming from Bangalore, India. JP is a writer, poet, metal bass player, and cat rescuer. JP, why don't you introduce yourself to the dickheads and tell them a little bit more details about what you do and who you are.
Sure thing. Hi, dickheads. So, yes, I am a writer. I mostly write weird fiction. I've got 2 little chapbooks of horror stories out from Dunham's Manor Press. More recently, I've self-published a collection called Come Tomorrow, which contains most of my short stories that are based in the city of Bangalore, sort of trying to draw on the rich and varied history of my own city and create a sort of low-key Bangalore mythos. A novella of mine called Strength of Water was published late last year. So that's one of my latest things. And I have a collection of poetry called Broken Cup coming out later this month, in fact, this July. I play the bass guitar for a doom metal band called Gin and Miskatonic. We've got 2 CDs out and a split vinyl with Sky Shadow Obelisk, which is a doom band from Rhode Island, I think. And yes, my wife and I rescue cats and dogs. Our house is full of them. I'm in a room right now that's animal free, just for an hour or so.
Right.
And that tells you most of the things about me. Yep.
So we are going to talk about Counterclock World, but first we're going to do our normal segments, and we're going to start with the PKD news. There was a cool article about, and this does relate to Counterclock World, on tabletmag.com. There was a really cool new article about Philip K. Dick and James Pike, who is the Archbishop of San Francisco that PKD considered with Tony Boucher to be 2 of his most important mentors. He eventually wrote a book, The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, about James Pike. But James Pike was also partially the inspiration for Anarch Peak here in Counterclock World. And so this article is just specifically about PKD and James Pike, and it just came out a couple days ago. So, and that's on tabletmag.com. And I found it to be a really good, interesting article about that relationship because, and it also talks a lot about James Peake's weird death, which he died wandering in the desert in Israel. Which he went on a trip there. They were looking for he was on some kind of spiritual quest in Israel, and his car ran out of gas. And he and his wife went in 2 different directions trying to find help. And she found help, and he did not. And this and Tony Boucher's death were the 2 deaths that had the biggest impact on PKD in the 60s. Because he was his Gnostic religious.
Well, so what year did he die?
I will look to see.
All right.
in Divine Invasions, but
Anyway, while David is a bad teacher and doesn't have the right notes, Larry, if for those of us who weren't introduced at the start of the podcast, like normal, who are you again? Who asked that question?
oh, I'm sorry, I did a bad job. I haven't done this in a while.
That's right. That's my buddy.
Yeah.
And who are you?
Oh, I am Anthony Sacrament of Miraculous Rebirth Trevino, and I am the Dickheads podcast resident annoying Harlequin. Thank you very much.
He
Yeah.
died in 1969.
69. Yeah. There we go. Anywho, the other news is that the new Okchaku. How do we pronounce it?
Otaku! What?
Otaku.
Otaku, dude! Ochaku? Not nunchaku, David!
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyways, issue number 41 came out. And issue number 41 is very good. And we have a review up on our Dickheads Facebook, and I did one for my blog, and it's it's another good journal. 41 issues in, you kind of know what you're going to get, but it has some really interesting and good letters. And two of the things that I thought were really good on this issue was there was a collection of articles from Speculation Magazine, which was a fanzine out of the UK in the 60s. And there's a review of the Three Stigmata, like a 4-page review of the Three Stigmata from the mid-60s. That is fantastic. Some interviews from the Italian translator who just recently passed. And he also talks about the challenges and the differences of translating Delaney's Dahlgren versus translating Dick. That was very interesting. And then there is, at the end of the issue, which is really interesting, is 2 letters from Ted White, who was a editor who worked on the serialized version of We Can Build You. Yeah, it's another great newsletter. And then the last item of news, or that I think is newsworthy, is that Total Recall had its 30th anniversary. On to the next segment, which is Dicklike Suggestions. Larry, what video game do you have for us today? Or do you have
I don't have video games today.
Whoa! What do you got for us?
I have a TV show and a movie.
Ooh.
And, I'll go through it really quick. First of all, I saw the movie the other day. Mwah. Fantastic mid-90s horrible CGI movie, Virtuosity.
Oh.
I'm sorry, did you just call Virtuosity horrible?
Yes.
Virtuosity
horrible in the best way.
is awesome.
In the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you got Denzel doing Denzel, and you got Russell Crowe just chewing scenery.
As the villain, Sid 6.7, my dude.
Russell Crowe is great when he plays a thug. He's actually a good actor. But when he plays anyone intelligent, it's so cringy and fantastic.
Not so good. Yeah.
I have to admit, I had never seen
as virtual reality. What's true? What's false? Paranoia. A shitty cop and a crazy villain, and like all. It's basically after I watched it, I went, there's got to be some PKD influence here somewhere, but I couldn't find anything that said it was influenced by PKD at all.
I haven't watched Virtuosity in a long time, and I think looking back on it, for me, it probably falls more into the William Gibson camp. But yeah, there's definitely some PKD stuff going on too. Yeah.
The main villain is a conglomerate of like 250 serial killers.
Yeah, put together through this janky computer program. Yeah, it's awesome.
Virtual reality thing.
Yeah.
Running.
Mm-hmm.
It requires you to wear a full bodysuit to get into it. It's fucking fantastic. Right, so there's that. And then on the entirely opposite end of the spectrum, when you go from wacky, terrible CGI to devs, which is...
I haven't watched that yet.
It's great.
A brainy, slow, philosophical tragic nightmare. I mean, it's just incredible. The show, I still think about it. I saw it I finished watching it 5 months ago. I still think about it and what it means and what it was trying to do and what it was trying to say. Basically what it is a woman gets a job at a developer's secret lab where he is trying to create software that will tell that's basically a time machine forward and backward. And the only reason he's building this is because his daughter and his wife died, and he wants his daughter back. And from there, it builds into this story of corporate espionage and what is real, and do we have a will of our own, or is everything assigned? Is fate assigned to us? And it's got a depth you don't see on TV very often. Plus, it's taking chances by not trying to entertain. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's not worried about entertaining. It's worried about telling its story. Just like it's the same guy that did what's his name, David?
Alex Garland.
Alex Garland, who did Deus Machina. Is that what it's? Yeah. Yeah. And of course he was the secret director of Dredd. Right? That was him?
Yeah. He supposedly directed most of Dredd. He wrote the screenplay for it. And
it's Ex Machina, right? Ex
Machina. He also was he was a novelist first. He wrote The Beach, and then he wrote Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, and then Sunshine, which
Sunshine. I love that movie.
Yeah, I love that movie too. Loki loved Sunshine.
I think this is his pet project, because it's a lot like Ex Machina in the sense that there's alternate reality. You don't know who's real, who's fake, what's real, what's fake. But it's just a great story. Now, the one detraction I have from the show is I did not like the lead actress's acting. I thought she was pretty stunted, and some of her reactions were bizarre. Other than that, I mean, it's not that hard to get by that, but that's the only criticism I really have of the show.
Which is the main thing that most people have been saying, and I do think that it was somewhat of a stylistic choice.
I believe there was stylistic choice in there, but if you look at all the other actors, I mean, who are great actors like Alison Pill and Nick Offerman, their performances are
incredible,
great, and they're emotionless performances, but they somehow convey emotion through non-emotion. It's like Pinter on crack. I love it.
Yeah. Anthony, do you have a Dicklike suggestion this month?
I have 2 suggestions, neither of which are Dicklike. You'll just have to eat it and be quiet, David. So my first recommendation, shout out to whoever in the comment section on YouTube wanted us to cover Videodrome. I agree. And but I watched the 2019 remake of Cronenberg's Rabid last week. Really? And I don't know if any of you have seen the original Cronenberg Rabid. It's good, right? Good, typical.
Wait, which one is that? That's
with the motorcycle accident.
Okay, all right.
And it was recently remade by the Soska sisters, who did American Mary, which is also an incredible horror film.
I like the Soska sisters. They've done some good stuff.
They made what I think is a truly good remake, where it keeps the spirit of the original but updates it without being, talking down to you or making you feel dumb or just trying to rehash everything that's gotten done before. All the practical effects are killer and super gnarly, and it has a pretty downbeat ending, which, as everyone should know by now, I'm a big fan of. And then Did I have I don't know why I said 2, but I can also agree with Scott Jones, who was on the Zapgun episode, that Upload is a pretty solid show.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good show.
It's flawed. It's definitely flawed, but it's pretty good.
Yep.
I mean, consider the writer of that show wrote my favorite episode of The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm already predisposed.
Which Simpsons episode?
Bart loses his soul. So,
You sold my soul for Pogs? Not only Pogs, Bart, Alf Pogs. I love that show.
yeah.
JP, do you have a Dicklike suggestion for us this time?
Well, yes. This is a novel from 2019, Infinite Detail by Tim Morgan, however you pronounce it. He's a British science fiction writer. And this is a very interesting novel that sort of takes us between 2 timelines. In the first one, it's perhaps our near future. And the infinite detail of the title refers to how, with virtual reality enhanced experiences and real-time tracking of everything, we do literally live in a world of infinite detail, right? When I think back to my college days, if I was interested in a musician that I saw on MTV or something, it might take me weeks, if not months, to actually get more info about them. And now we have all this infinite detail at our fingertips. But so much of it is owned, operated, and in the interest of corporations whose motives are not always to our welfare, right?
What? You're not thinking of our best.
Fancy that. So he paints that kind of a scenario. It's very much snatched from the headlines, very much 5-6 years hence. But then he also has a second timeline in which basically the plug has been pulled on the internet by some anarchists, and we're all living in a world in which everything that was online is down, everything that depended on being online, like your smart homes or your Internet of Things, and of course the internet itself is gone. And part of it is sort of to dramatize the extent to which our world has become one of infinite cyber detail. And the other part is towards the very end, he starts building this hope that what was wrong with the pre-catastrophe world, and by extension our real world, is the way the internet has sort of gone away from being a democratic space to a highly business-controlled space. Mm-hmm. And he kind of posits that towards the very end of his novel, the people in this slightly further future of his have actually found a sort of buried capsule that could help them start implementing internet technology again. But the hope is that this time it's not going to be in control of corporations. It's a very interesting book. Plot is not the strongest aspect of it. What I like it more for are the character studies, the way people interact with technology, the way they make do without technology. So, like any good science fiction, it leaves you with a lot more to think about than just necessarily charting out the plot. And I think, it is Dicklike in that Philip K. Dick was very interested in how media of different kinds, technology of different kinds sort of interact with and control our psyches. Ubik sort of is the ultimate novel about that. So yeah, right. Tim Mon's 2019 novel Infinite Detail is my Dicklike pick.
Ooh, that sounds great. Definitely will check that out. I have one that I know Anthony has started reading, but probably has not finished yet. And then, but they're both published by friend of the show, former guest, D. Harlan Wilson. And first up is his soon-to-be-released novel, and if you're on YouTube, I'm holding it up, Outre, which is David Wilson's new kind of Ballardian, very Ballard-ish kind of stream of consciousness. Yeah, it's skits flow, just totally super weird, hilarious insanity, like trip through David's brain, which is a very interesting place to spend time. This book is about a it's a future where cinema and life has the walls between like cinema and fictional media and like our brains has kind of broken down, and we don't know the difference between cinema and real world. And the main character is an actor, but then there's this like weird kind of Melville Moby Dick thing. I don't even entirely know how this makes sense or comes into it, but the main thing is you're laughing and cracking up the whole time you're reading it, and thinking like, what the hell is going on through most of it. It's very weird, very good. I always laugh when I read David's books, so I really appreciate this one. Anthony, you started reading this one too?
I have started reading it, yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on Trey? Is it your first time reading Wilson's fiction?
Yeah, so it's insane. It is an insane book, but beautifully written insanity.
Yeah. Beautifully written insanity. I think that's... but also, Professor Wilson also just released this new edition. I'm holding it up for the YouTube viewers. With this awesome cover of Barry Maltzberg's Revelations. And this new edition comes with a kind of middle finger in the air introduction by Professor Wilson called Barry Maltzberg and the Gravity of Science Fiction. And basically the idea that he's getting at is that science fiction belongs to the 20th century, and that he's basically saying that he doesn't really view science fiction from this century as being really worthwhile compared to science fiction of the 20th century. It also has two afterwards, one from 1976 and one from this year by Maltzberg himself. Basically, it's kind of like, it was very network before network, and Barry Maltzberg deals very much with this. It's about how TV kind of exploits destroying human beings for ratings and for gossip and ideas, but it's also thematically in the whole series of books that Maltzberg was kind of deconstructing the space program at the time. And so it's a very interesting book, very out of date, but also very timely.
When was it written?
It was written in 1972.
Okay.
So, and one of the main characters that comes on this TV show is an astronaut who has come back from, and this running theme through Maltzberg's books at the time was how full of shit the space program was, and how like they're trying to make the space program out to be like these all-American goody two-shoes, and how they're all like sex-craved psychomaniacs in Barry Maltzberg's books. And so I highly recommend people pick up this edition for no other reason than to let's keep supporting Barry Maltzberg being back in print, an author, a greatly underrated author from the new wave. And I think it's very good and important that David Wilson is putting his work back out, and I want to support that. Before we transition to Counterclock World, though, JP, I'm going to put you on the spot again a little bit, but I think this one should be a little bit easier to riff on, which is I'm interested in how did you discover, because you're very into the new wave of science fiction from the 60s, which is like a lot of our focus, and I'm wondering how, because we're coming to it from an American perspective, how is science fiction literature translated in India, and do you read in English, and like how did you come to being such a big science fiction fan in India?
So there is quite a substantial science fiction fandom in India, and I think has been. Part of the reason is that engineering is a very popular profession here. And I think these, especially slightly older science fiction like Asimov, Clarke, and so on, and then the next generation of hard SF writers like Ben Bova, and on to the beginnings of cyberpunk. I think this sort of stuff was very much passed along to these sciencey guys in engineering colleges. I'm not from that background. I did a BA in journalism and psychology. But I think there's always been this geeky element of middle-class Indian boys studying math, studying engineering, and loving science fiction. There used to be quite a lot of Bengali science fiction at one point, but the Bengalis kind of have everything. Any genre you can name, they've had a sort of a homegrown literature of that. Bengal and Kerala are two states in India that have very good publishing industries in their own language. And people famously read books in their own language. And I suppose most of the translations into Indian languages are into Malayalam and Bengali respectively. And of course Hindi, because it's sort of one of the leading national languages. But I would say that the bulk of sci-fi fans in India read English books in English. We were part of the British Empire at one time, so we could kind of still have the language. And for me, Philip K. Dick was quite a ubiquitous figure, in the early 90s. Things like Total Recall. I mean, if you've got Schwarzenegger in a movie and it's the 90s, everybody's going to sort of want to know everything about where that movie came from. And I was fascinated by the idea that, there's this guy who sort of writes about reality being an illusion, and
Well,
we'll get to that for sure.
yeah. This book was released in 1967.
David, what was happening in 1967?
Well, thank you for asking, Larry. That was the year of the first heart transplant, which was interesting. The first ATM was put somewhere in the world. And let's see, the first Super Bowl was played. So,
Packers.
Yeah, Packers and the Chiefs in the first Super Bowl, and the 6-Day War for Israel. So that's what happened in 1967, just to give you some context. I don't think it's quite as anchoring to the time as Elvis shaking his hips, like when in those early.
Wasn't 67 is also the Summer of Love, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit before that, but the Torrey Canyon runs and the Monterey International Pop Fest, that big pop fest, was 1967 as well. So, and that was kind of like the pre-Woodstock. Before that.
You are correct, Larry. 1967 is in fact the Summer of Love.
Summer of Love. All right.
All right, so I was wrong. What the fuck?
Got it, David.
67, right? But this one has a interesting writing and publication history. We don't have a lot of quotes from Dick about it. He did not talk about this book very much.
Well, that's a shame.
It started as a short story. Your Appointment.
Well, that's interesting because he won't shut up about Time Out of Joint.
Yeah, he had a lot to say about Time Out of Joint. And Your Appointment Will Be Yesterday was published in August 1966. And this short story, I sent you guys a link to the PDF. Did anyone read it?
I did.
I read it.
If you read the novel, you read basically the short story. So
yeah. Personally, I think the short story is better than the novel. I think it's a more compact version of the idea. I think he tries to explain it a little bit better in the short story.
Right. Well, he introduces something in the short story that he doesn't introduce in the novel, which I thought would have been great in the novel if you had people moving forward in time and people moving backward in time. It would have made a great dynamic. But that part of the short story didn't translate.
Yeah, he scrapped it for the novel.
Yeah. So the manuscript for the short story was received at SMLA on August 27th, 1965. So the short story was 2 years earlier, and it was he wrote it directly after Unteleported Man. So he was fully not making sense with his... and it was before a short story called Holy Quarrel, which I have not read. So this, and it's interesting just to think, this makes me think of the fact that it's a very different world that his literary agency is handling his short stories, because I'm not sure that literary agencies handle short stories at all anymore.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Collections, yeah, but not individual stories.
It is very similar in concept to one of his short stories from 1953, the year where he wrote a million short stories in 1953. The indefatigable, I don't even know how to...
Indefatigable.
Frog, which dealt with the Zeno's paradox. Yes. Yeah. And I don't think I've read that story either.
I haven't read it.
Yeah.
I was working my way through the chronologically collected 4 volumes of his short stories.
Right.
Of course, it does feel like the 50s were sort of his peak productive era. I do remember The Indefatigable Frog.
Yeah. And but yeah, any story from 1953 is notable in the sense that, because that was the year before von Vogt talked to him at the convention and said, you
gotta write novels, kid.
You gotta write novels.
Short story stuff ain't working.
Yeah.
That's the role you were born to play, Larry, in a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, the Barton Fink moment. But I definitely think that 1953 is a zone for the short stories where he cared so much more about the short stories, because I think these later things, like the short stories, are almost just like outlines or working out ideas. Like, he's thinking ahead of time, I'm probably going to expand this into a novel. I just need to get this short story sale, or I need to get this idea out there. I don't see anything where his intent is there for the short story. I'm just guessing.
But better or worse, right?
Yes. And one of the major differences between the short story and the novel is the way the government is designed also in the short story. It's called the Syndicate, and the government is much more hands-on about eradicating the inventions and the things that are going on. And that's another thing that I like better in the short story is the ERADs are very, definitely one of the more interesting parts of the novel for me. But I like that the idea is that the government is much more involved in that.
Not the ERADs as a separate entity, but as part of the government.
Yes, and I find that the system or the syndicate or the existence of this is a strong part of the novel or the short story, and something that I wish had been more a part of the novel and kind of been more dystopian, or it had been a heavier part of the novel. But I mean, it is what it is. But that's something that I enjoyed more about the short story. The novel was written in late 1965, so pretty within the same year that he submitted the short story to SMLA. And we know that it was somewhere in the time between when he finished Unteleported Man and started the Ganymede Takeover, the next book we have to look forward to. And are you guys ready for the terrible original Philip K. Dick title?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. And there is an article in the New Journal that talks about imagine if we had all these novels with their original titles. So the original title for Counterclock World is The Dead Grow Young, or The Dead Are Young.
Wow, he really.
So I'm actually gonna fight you on that, because I actually like the title "The Dead Grow Young." It's got a nice kind of '70s jam band aspect to it for an album title, and you know what? I'm here for it. I'm fucking here for that title. The second one, not so much, but that first one's fine. Nah, it's a jam band title, my dude.
All
yeah,
right,
jam bands suck.
I disagree with that too.
Okay, so Anthony's going to be the hard take. JP, do you disagree? How do you feel about the title, The Dead Grow Young?
Too literal. Counterclock World is more mysterious, more
On the
interesting.
nose, right? It's just
Yeah.
be right story be this.
Story
They're
beat.
both intriguing titles, but I think Counterclock World is a little more mysterious.
It's certainly more literary.
Sure, it's got a nicer sound to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he's never going to get the title right. He did not have Don Wollheim to save him on this one. It was not published by Ace, but it was published by Berkeley Books as a paperback original in February 1967. Berkeley being Don Wollheim's main competition, and if you listen to our interview with Don Wollheim's daughter, you know
Betsy Wollheim.
Betsy Wollheim. But if you listen to Betsy talk about it, this was a huge battle between Berkeley and Ace over authors. So most of the time, Don Wollheim won, but Don Wollheim did feel that he was getting cherry picked a lot of times for these authors. So it's interesting that Counterclock World was a Berkeley book. So part of the thing is Berkeley had this deal with Del Rey, and Del Rey was technically the line that were having the battle with the authors. So this wasn't specifically a Del Rey title. It was specifically from the main line of Berkeley. So it may not have been part of this battle, but I believe it was. But either way, it was not. It's interesting that it was not published by Ace. It had no Don Wollheim influence, and that
they still changed the title.
They still changed the title, but I think the fact that it doesn't have a Don Wollheim influence at this point is notable. Because a lot of the more literary titles of this early era were the ones that did not have the Don Wollheim influence. Your Time Out of Joints, your Man in the High Castle, and
well, yeah, I can totally see why Don Wollheim wouldn't want this one.
Yeah,
yeah, it's not like Solar Lottery. It's not like there's very minimal action. So yeah, there's no space pirates.
And Betsy made clear too that some of what Don wanted from things, and we know from his rejection out of Martian Time Slip that he was more literal about how he did science fiction, and I can't see him. I can see Don Wollheim just looking at this concept and just being like, "No way, no way, I'm not doing this one."
Right after the Eye in the Sky Christianity thing, and this one being all about religion and.
Yeah, he's probably thinking, I can't sell this in Middle America, and I'm not going to do this.
Yeah,
and so I think it is very notable that it's not a Don Wollheim joint per se, and I think that's one of the things.
Joint.
Yeah. It's I think it's notable for that. We don't know who edited this book really. We some person at Berkeley, and unlike a lot of the other PKD books, we can see letters, notes, and ideas that came from the editors, from Don Wollheim, from Terry Carr. There's none of that for Counterclock World. So we only have 2 quotes from PKD about Counterclock World. Anthony, can you hit us up with the first one, which doesn't really tell us too much?
Meanwhile, my writing career creaks on. My Berkeley book, Counterclock World, just came out with a very nice cover, which shows a girl who looks exactly like Nancy. What is more, the girl in the story, Lotta, is based on Nancy. I keep wondering if by any chance Terry and/or Carol Carr gave Damon Knight, the editor of Berkeley Books, a picture of Nancy. They have several which I sent them. Otherwise, it must be chalked up to Psy, I suppose. Come on, PKD, don't be silly.
So, okay.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, that Lotta is based on what's her face?
Yeah, but all the women characters are based on his wives or girlfriends.
Right.
Yeah, But Lotta is such a shit character.
Mm.
Well, and that also just contradicts what I just said, because we now know from that quote who the editor was. It was Damon Knight.
Yeah.
And Damon Knight, of course, is a huge name in science fiction and long-running figure in science fiction, who's also the founder of the Clarion workshops. And we know a lot. We know that he was one of the early champions of the solar lottery when it came out. That Damon Knight was a person who, by the way, Damon Knight was known for his very harsh critical essays about science fiction, which are gathered in a book, In Search of Wonder, which is a fantastic read to get an idea of, because most of it are his crappy reviews of what he didn't like. And so you get a lot of what Damon Knight didn't like that was happening in science fiction. So it's interesting to see that. I actually find it hard to believe that he bought the concept of Counterclock World. And I wonder if...
It was definitely different, I think.
Yeah, that's true. But it does...
And also, Counterclock World does have 2 or 3 different themes or concepts sort of nested within it, right? There is the Hobart phase, but there's also the divided America, divided on color lines, racial tension, and then the third aspect is what then does the afterworld or God mean if people are coming back from the dead? So it does manage to throw in quite a few stimulating ideas into the mix.
Oh yeah, thematically it's full. I mean, it's very much full. It's just
and
that,
you know, when is it the head librarian or her daughter who talks about the riots in LA, and they've been going on since, well,
it's
since the time,
I think it's the daughter.
yeah, since the time, yeah. And so some of it almost feels contemporary at times because of the racial tensions, that sort of thing, and you realize some things just haven't changed since PKD's days. So
Right.
for me, that was an interesting aspect.
Yeah, when you hear about her talking about the Watts riots and everything.
Yes. And you think, wow, some of these things have just never stopped happening, and same unresolved issues.
Yep.
That's very interesting. I don't know if there's a lot of race in his other books.
He does some stuff in some of the other books. He likes to have characters that are he likes to have black characters that the black part of them doesn't matter. They're just characters. So even though characters in the books mention, and they use a lot of words that Anthony hates, like Negro and colored and things like that, for PKD, just talking about a person.
Yeah.
So
Not taking your bait.
But it's true. He is just talking about a person, even with the poorly chosen words and everything, in a lot of other novels.
Well, yes, but here I think racial tensions are sort of on his mind.
They're very central.
Very central.
Yeah, and we'll get more into into that as it goes on. Anthony, the other quote. Now, this is interesting because in the Exogenous, PKD does talk very heavily about his more theological novels. However, there's only one mention.
You mean the exegesis, right?
Exegesis, yeah. And in the Exegesis, he does talk about these more theological novels at greater length. However, Counterclock World only gets one little bit. And so we have that quote. Anthony, can you hit us with that one?
Time is about to end. Lineal time as a factor of life. It won't reverse, as in Counterclock World, but our present will dissolve as all the accretions of the last 3,500 years will vanish, as if dreamlike they never took place. And that's it. That's Dick on Counterclock World, I guess.
That's all we know. Yeah, he didn't talk much about this book, and it's hard to say if he obviously didn't have a lot of deep thoughts about it. He, like Anthony said, Time Out of Joint's a book he likes to talk about. Man in the High Castle is a book.
Eye in the Sky he likes to talk about.
Three Stigmata.
Well,
But-
Stigmata.
I would say most likely this is an unfulfilled idea. Even though he wrote the novel, he probably feels like he didn't successfully convey what he wanted to. So why talk about it?
Yeah. I feel like this concept is one, and we'll get more into it too. Like one of the reasons why this is hard for me is as a kind of more rationally minded science fiction reader, I don't like the surreal stuff as much. I'm not a fully hard sci-fi reader, but I need things to make a little bit of sense. And I know Kim Stanley Robinson, when we get to his quotes about the book later, he had a problem with this because the way Kim Stanley Robinson talked about it is he explained it as biological time is going backwards, right? But that's not really true because you also have the process of the food and you have the putting the whiskers back on and those kinds of things, which doesn't. There's no consistency to this idea.
Yeah, the concept is not carried out completely in any way.
Yeah.
Well, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but do they give any indication, or maybe it all just kind of ties in together in the bigger picture, but do they give any indication or reasoning as to why their greetings are reversed? Just to be cute, I guess?
I think it's just to be cute.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other logical reason for it.
Yeah, because time is not subjectively flowing backwards for them.
Yeah.
It's just certain processes like Sogum ingestion and subsequent
Cigarette
disgorgement.
smoking.
Yeah, that seem to be reversed.
Yeah.
And of course, one funny little touch was that people say food when they mean to say shit as a
Or
curse
fuck.
word.
I mean,
Oh,
it's
food.
either way, yeah.
Yeah.
It-
That's what I'm going to do now
food is
at work. Just, food. That's my new thing.
Right.
So it's not very rigorously played out, but I think he sort of picked and chosen the aspects of time reversing that interested him and just sort of waved a magic wand at the other ones.
He really did. He
Yeah.
really did wave a magic wand.
Right. Which is like
He doesn't go in depth about any aspect.
right, because I mean, how are you going to have it becomes a completely impossible, intelligible mess to write about if you like really have everything going backwards. If words are going backwards, if everything's going, I mean,
Sure, but the wand waving isn't something new to Dick. He
No.
does it in a lot of books. Dick is very much a sci-fi writer, but he's very much also a fantasy writer.
yeah,
And I think that we've seen that come up many times by this point, where we're not going to get a hard sci-fi description
feel
of
like-
anything.
This one is
Which
much
is fine
more
with me.
on display.
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah,
Just
I think his interest was creating situations which were like, like experimental situations for his philosophical ideas.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But as you said, that's much more on display here. It's, I think he just really wanted to explore what happens if people come back from the afterlife experience. Although
Right.
it takes time for him to get around to that.
Built all this around that
Yeah.
one idea of people rising from the dead and experiencing life in reverse.
and
Right.
I don't know how much time moving forwards or backwards really matters overall to the greater theme that he's trying to get. The thing about it is the theological idea that the Anarch Peak, all these people are wanting Anarch Peak to tell them, like, hey, this is what the afterlife's like, and all these different things, the race relations, the how society works, and all these things are kind of hinging on this theological concept. And that's what's most important in Counterclock World.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why ultimately it's not going to be one of my favorites. But anyways,
Well, I have many reasons it's not my favorite. Many reasons.
but we almost skipped a part. We almost skipped a very important part because
we-
we're already talking about the book. But what we need,
Yeah, let's talk about the book.
we need the story breakdown.
Oh,
Oh,
that's right.
Story breakdown. All right. What? The story breakdown. Larry, hit us up.
Oh my God. All right. All right, I have notes for you YouTubers. There's the notes.
They're real.
They're real. They're on paper. All right. All right. This is my book report on PKD's God book, which is called Counterclock World. And I have notes, so it's not all off the cuff. I plan jokes.
Oh, I cannot wait.
All right. So, Counterclock World by Philip K. Dick, Chapter 1. So there's a dipshit cop hanging out in a cemetery, and he sees or he hears an old woman yelling from the ground, and immediately I was like, whoa, dead people are coming up from the grave. And I know this is pre-zombies, so this shit's getting wild. And I think immediately, what a great chapter. Anthony is going to love this shit. He's going to say, wow, this is not some dude counting onions. This is a guy seeing a woman coming out of the grave. Okay.
He was peeling potatoes, and I still would argue that is one of the most boring cold opens for a book I've ever read. But anyway, go on.
So then we move on, the same chapter. We go to our protagonist, because I can't call him a hero. I can't. I can't. I just won't. I can't. To Sebastian Hermes and his wife, Lotta. And they're at home. They get this call from this cop, and he's like, hey, I got a dead riser, deader coming out. You want to come down, make some cash, get some quatloos. And so this is the Rick and Morty part where he calls everyone like it's a heist movie, and he's just like, hey, we got one. And everyone's like, you son of a bitch, I'm in. And they plan to go. They go and they get the body out of there. And while they're getting the body out of there, they're like, a couple of them, the priest and Seabass are like, I got a feeling that this weird little tiny cemetery has some secrets, and there's something big happening here. So then we cut to the short story, and we meet a character whose name has changed from the short story to Appleford, because Appleford is a much more in charge kind of name. And then so Appleford wakes up. He says goodbye to some woman on the phone. He does his butt smoking, and he. This is the only time we actually see someone put away the fresh food that they puked up. So he throws up his food and he puts it away in the cabinets, which at that point I was like, this is some goofy ass shit going on here. What's happening? I still didn't understand the butt smoking, the Sogum, all that stuff. And so that happens. But he sounds smart. He's like, I've got plans. I've got ideas. And then we go back to the graveyard, and the guys are like, all right, so there's this dude who has this ornate grave. We're pretty sure it's him that's going to be born next. His name is Timothy Peake?
Anarch.
What?
Timothy Peake.
Timothy Peake.
Yeah.
Anarch is
Timothy Peake.
Thomas Peake.
Oh, sorry, Thomas Peake. Thank you. And so he's an important guy in this newfangled religion called the Udai, or the Udi, or the Udi, however you want to pronounce it. which is an odd name because when I looked up Udi or Udai, whatever, it's a Baltic Christian people,
Oh.
which doesn't jive with it being a mostly black religion in this timeline. Who, because of the Anarch Peak, this guy who's about to come back to life, they now have their own territory. They've broken up the United States into 3 parts. We're not sure what the other part is. Is it the? I don't know if it's mentioned in the book. I assume it's the Eastern United States, but there's the what is it called, Anthony? The free.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I don't have it in my notes.
The FPS or FNM,
Municipality.
Free Negro Municipality, yeah. Which we assume is Colorado because it's always Colorado with Philip K. Dick, and then the Western United States where our story takes place.
It says here on page 91 that they was divided into 3 pieces, 4 if you count Hawaii and Alaska, that have become separate nations.
Yeah, but they're not named even at that point, right?
No, it doesn't name the other parts. No.
No, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of ambiguous when it comes to the grander scale of things.
There's a lot that's ambiguous throughout the whole novel for no reason. Anyway, so we've met everyone. They're like, all right, we got to figure out what's going on with this body. We got to get this Anarch Peak. Somehow we're going to be rich. We're going to get mad money. And I wrote notes that don't make even sense to me. So
For some reason,
what?
Sebastian's wife is sent to the library.
Okay, no, I've got that. I've got that. So I have called it Library 1 because there's basically 3 major library scenes. So Library 1 is the wife.
Action-packed, this book.
Yeah, she is scared shitless of the library, and we're not ever told really why she's scared of a library. I mean, granted, it's about eradicating all knowledge. That is, the library in this world is dedicated to the destruction of all knowledge. That is their goal. So
as that knowledge has been discovered going backwards, it has to
be destroyed.
Yeah.
It's a very convoluted thing, but it makes sense inside the novel. So she's super shy. She's basically like an 11-year-old girl would be nowadays, where she's coy, shy, like, oh, I can't talk to people. And she's the George Michael from Arrested Development. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm here and people are talking to me. And she's fucking annoying as shit.
But I remember thinking that, he's made her into such a wet blanket. You don't.
It can be endearing.
Just seems capable of either writing a completely passive woman, or a femme fatale, or some sort of villainous woman whose evilness and villainousness seems to boil down to the fact that she has her own motivations. Like the police.
Who is oftentimes vaguely ethnic.
Yes, that also. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think these women characters are a highlight anywhere, but least of all here.
Anywhere, yeah, but so she's shy. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know where to go. And Tinbane sees her. This is our police friend. Our police friend sees her, and he's like, "Wow, she's cute. I'm now in love with her because cute means love. I don't know anything about love." So.
Yeah, I found that so.
This is a novel of not knowing what love is or what it can be.
Oh, and he can't make up his fucking mind at all.
Oh, that's in here too.
Okay.
I
So
started wondering if he's trying to depict that Tinbane and Lotta are regressing mentally because of the Hobart phase.
I would like to think so, but even
That's actually interesting.
then there's some
But it doesn't hold up.
yeah
It would be really clever if that was what he was doing.
there has to be some connection, right? It can't just be this. He doesn't even do the love at first sight thing. It's like I now care about you, and then when he saves her, she's like, I'm in love with you now for some reason because you saved me.
Well, and it's weird because he's so blasé about his marriage, right? And it kind of boils down to he's blasé about it, but now he feels regretful for sleeping with this person, but then he's not. He doesn't care. Let's just be honest about it.
Everyone in this novel is confused about love, or at least our main characters have no idea what they're doing.
Now, I haven't looked at Divorcepedia to see exactly where we are, but I'm pretty certain that we were he and Anne were on the skids, and he already was crushing on Nancy, but had not left for her at this time. And if he wasn't, it sure seems like it from reading this book.
Well, he got divorced from Anne in '64.
Oh, so he would have just...
Yeah, I think he was with Nancy at this point. But I think he was having insecurities about being with this woman he didn't really trust, because Anne had given him support in a lot of ways, and this new woman was like, I just love you because you're you. And he's
just so Jay knows, we do this Dick's Divorcepedia because so many of these books seem to be him trying to work through his relationship issues.
Absolutely. It definitely feels that way, and it feels quite self-serving the way he does it. I often find that with PKD, the way he writes about women has a lot to do with what was going on in his life at the time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't reflect the best on him here, especially.
All right, so let me get through this thing. All right, so next we meet the teams. I like to call this Meet the Teams because it reminds me of one of those late 90s
montages.
2000 movies that are like Tarantino movies, but like Locked, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and what
Ocean's 11.
Smoking Aces, Ocean's 11, those kinds of movies where it's like, all right, all these different groups are going for the same thing, and it's going to end in some big shootout or something like that. So we meet all the teams. We meet the Italians. We meet the librarians, the eradicators. The cops have their own contingency. The Udidi, if you want to, I'm just going to say Udidi. They have their own contingent of people going for the Anarch Peak. Everyone's goal is to get to the Anarch Peak. And in my mind, I was thinking, all right, so we're going to this we're going to build all these groups to this crescendo. But no, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the library, and and then Lotta is going to have to talk to Mavis, the evil librarian, and be stuck there. And then Tinbane is going to go, well, I don't love my wife, but I'm now in love with this girl, so I'm going to save her. Oh, but even before he does that, I just got to give you this one, the best Joey Tribbiani line from this novel is when Tinbane's trying to convince, he wants to blackmail Lotta into loving him. And so he's like, I got all this dirt on you that I could use, but I'm not gonna. So, and I quote, could you spread any of your love in my direction? It's
Oh, God.
the creepiest way to, and she basically is like, ew, no, I'm gonna leave. So his past does not work at that time. But then he saves her in this. He saves her from the library, and she immediately says, "I'm now in love with you. I'm leaving my husband for you because you saved me and he didn't. Because I'm not shallow in any way." So then there's next comes the 50 pages of capitulation, which is like 50 Shades of Grey. But this is the 50, it's actually more like 100, but I call it the 50 pages of capitulation because basically what Sebastian does is through this whole section say, this is the way things have to be. And then someone says, no, we want to do it differently. No, this is the way it has to be. And then they say, no, can we do it different? And he's like, we have to do it your way. And he says that constantly to everyone. He makes a deal with the librarians. He makes a deal with the Uditi. He makes a deal with the Italians. He makes a deal with what's her name, Ann Fisher. He makes a deal with everyone, but it's all the same deal, and he's just lost. Like at one point, right after Lotta leaves him, he says to his buddies, "We got to get the Anarch Peak out of here." And his buddies are like, "All right, we'll take him here. We'll do this thing." And he's like, "You do it. I don't want to be involved." And he's just like totally weak, totally shallow, doesn't care at all. So we move on to the Library 3. Other stuff happens, no one cares. This is when Sebastian is supposed to have his big hero moment. So Sebastian is assigned by the Italians and by what's his name? Carl Gantrix, who is working for Raymond Roberts, the leader of the UDI.
And Carl Gantrix is a robot.
A robot. So he is
Jr.
He is given the tools to go into the library and save the Anarch Peak. So he is given an LSD grenade, an antidote for LSD, and a time shift shot. So he takes the time shift shot where he goes full Star Trek, where he's moving fast and everyone is basically frozen in position, goes up to the Anarch Peak and immediately says, "Nah, I'm going to save my stupid wife that doesn't even love me anymore." And doesn't even do that. Goes to Ann Fisher, who oh God, I should mention this. So when he first meets Ann Fisher, the evil daughter of the librarian, she says, "I've got this kid inside me that's growing backwards. All I need is for some dude to nail me and I can become unpregnant." And he's like, "Fuck yeah, we'll do that, even though I'm married. And I want my wife back. I don't want my wife back, but I have to do this because it's the right thing to do. But it's wrong, but I'm going to do it because no one's confused at all here." All right. So
yeah, the whole thing of it could be anybody. Like, yeah. It's weird to me.
Anybody could nail this girl.
It doesn't have to be the father.
Nope.
It can just be any person.
Any sperm will do, because it's sucked back into him.
Because you're gonna go back into some random dude. It doesn't matter.
Orgasms in this world must be really strange. It's all going backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes backwards and then it spews out your mouth, Larry. Come on. That's how we work in this world.
Oh boy.
Anyway, So he nails this girl, and then he's like, "Oh shit, you're a femme fatale. You're evil." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fucking evil, but didn't we do it? And it was awesome." And he's like, "Yeah, it was awesome." Oh, and the best part about that is later the Anarch Peak says, "You're totally in love with that girl," and then he's like, "Well, I guess I'm in love with her because the Anarch Peak said I was. So I guess that's the way it is, because he said it." Anyway, so the Library 3. He's given all the tools. He goes in. He meets up with Anne, the girl he nailed, and she's like, "Oh, we'll give you your wife. You leave the Anarch Peak here. Everything will be fine." And he says, "Yeah, sure, that's what I want." So he takes his wife. He leaves. He meets with Roberts. Roberts really digs into him in the most passive-aggressive way possible. He's like, no, you could have been a great man. You could have saved the world, but no, you chose to be a dick. That's cool. It's cool. We don't mind. You can be a dick if you want to. I mean, it's up to you. Whatever. So then these commandos from the UDI come to his house, and they say, "Give us information. We're going to kill you eventually, but give us information first." And Seabass is so broken, so down in the dumps. He's like, "I wish I could just die. Fine, whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. Can I leave and go to Mars for some reason with my shitty wife, and then we can be unhappy up there? It'll be great." And they're like, no, give us the information. Stay here. We'll be back with a grenade to blow you up. So they have this. Now we get to the section I call bad plans, and this is I'm just gonna read bad plans. All right. Now let's start with one other thing I have to mention before I go into bad plans is that this is another occasion where PKD writes a character that is just a total piece of shit. And then somewhere along the line during the story, the character succeeds because they're a piece of shit. So in this one, he's like, "Oh," the Anarch Peak says, "Oh, no, if you would have tried to save me, there was a bomb under my ass and we both would have died. So thank God you are not a good person."
Right.
Because if you were a good person, where would we be now? Anyway, so all right, so bad plan number 1, use the femme fatale. That's the commando's idea. We'll use the femme fatale. We'll get in. We'll get the Anarch Peak. We'll get into the library. We'll get the Anarch Peak. We'll get out. Everything will be cool. Bad plan number 2, save the femme fatale. That's where Seabass is like, "Oh, wait, if I save the femme fatale, she'll do cool stuff, and then I can go to Mars with my shitty wife." Bad plan number 3, blow up the library with nuclear bombs. This is the commando's other plan. Is if we can't get inside to save the Anarch Peak, we will nuke the library. That's thinking.
Because they've probably already moved him somewhere else or already killed him anyway.
So this is going to be a useless gesture, but hey, at least we'll look bad doing it. So bad plan number 4, I already mentioned, which is throw a bomb into the dude's apartment, but don't leave quickly. So what happens is this commando comes, tosses a bomb, into the apartment, into the Connacht, to blow up Seabass and Lotta, but he just stands there apparently, and he's like, "Ha ha ha! You fucking bitches are gonna blow up. Do I hear an explosion yet? No." So Seabass opens the door and just puts the assassin right on top of the bomb. He's like, you're doing that thing that they did in Nam where they just jump on the grenade. You're my jump on the grenade guy. And the commando blows up. Oh, Lotta dies, but really, did we care? I don't know. And then after Lotta blows up, he goes, he's all fucked up. Seabass is all fucked up. There's some shit that happens with hospitals, and then he wanders to the graveyard from the beginning, and he hears all the voices. So maybe he's insane, but maybe time is sped up, and reverse time is sped up, and everyone is coming back to life. We don't know. Then his buddy, who we haven't seen since like page 40, comes in.
It is much more interesting.
Yeah, and it's much more interesting. Comes and says, "You got to go to the hospital," and then it ends, and no one cares. And fuck this book. The end.
So tell us how you really feel there, Larry.
I look. Here is what I wrote down after I read this book. This is a goofy, uneven, close to brilliant mess.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the individual themes, get more into how things work. We've done a little bit of this already. So early in the book,
Someone please explain to me via a nice flow chart how Sogum works. Go ahead, David. I'll wait.
I can do it, but I'll let David do it.
Sogum is pre-food shit, I think, that you smoke into your body and it becomes food, right?
No, David, I feel like you are missing a very specific part. You smoke it up the butt.
Yeah.
It's
Put it in
like a
your
reverse enema.
Yeah, exactly like a reverse enema.
I really think that he just didn't want people shoving poop up their butt. I think that's why he introduced the smoke. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny too because at first, like, you can read past it a couple times where you're just like, okay.
In that first chapter where he's like, he leaned to the edge of the chair so he could fit the Sogum up his butt.
Right. And the first time he talks about a Sogum cafe or whatever, you're just kind of like, whatever. And then you're like, you have to kind of double take and go back and you're like, are they sticking, like...
You as the reader are walking by and you're like, oh, hey, it's Sogum Cafe. What? And then you have some go, wait a goddamn minute. And then you go back and you're like, hey, he's smoking that with your butt.
Yeah.
Whew. I struggled figuring that out, guys. Full disclosure.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I did too. It wasn't until we talked that I was like, oh, I got to look this up. I got to figure it out. I tried to look in the dictionary. There's no Sogum. I looked.
Yeah, no, dictionary.com was like, bro, that's a made-up word.
I found a review that said, so Dick introduces this thing called Sogum, which is some kind of poop. This is in an actual review of the book. It is some kind of poop.
New York Times review.
And from there, I was like, okay, so I know that they puke instead of eat. So basically, what they're doing is smoking bongs up their ass and then reverse digesting food.
I mean, I hope it's not like the width of a bong. Like, maybe that seems wildly uncomfortable. Maybe like a nice hookah pipe.
It depends on who you are.
I mean, that's also fair. I'm just saying, for me, I'm a dainty.
I'm not going to kink shame.
Yes.
I can see David turning red now.
No, it's okay. I do like I think some of the details on our chapter 2, where he really gets into it, that's where he first switches on the Sogum pipe. It says, very modern, he accepted a good masculine bundle.
Very modern.
No, he actually in the first chapter,
Reading the sports section while
Sebastian does use the Sogum in the first chapter.
Yeah.
Sitting precariously on the edge of his bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's page 17 where the Sogum is first explained. He's reading the sports page, which
My God, David, it's not where it's first explained. That's where it's second explained.
Okay, second explained. But this is I'm also wondering how sports works in this world. If everyone's trying to
Everything's in reverse.
Yeah, they have to start at they already know who won, and they have to get back to the point where everyone's tied at 0.
And I remain just as interested in sports. Moving on. Okay.
So yeah, he lays out the dishes and all that, and so it's also the same scene where he takes out the packet of whiskers. The second scene.
I don't understand the whiskers.
Yeah, so you buy the whiskers. You have to.
Do they grow back into your face?
I think so.
If you apply them with glue, do they then become
And then they go back
part of you and then suck into your face?
Yeah. So apparently you would want to put the whiskers back on. You wouldn't just deal with the fact that you don't have it. You have to do this process. This is part of the thing that makes this book so ridiculous.
Convoluted.
Yeah, and but then the erads are mentioned right after that, so it gets into the more interesting things. What I think he's trying to write these parts to be funny, but they just end up being distracting for me from the idea.
No, I tried to read them as funny, like the cigarettes being smoked backwards. Like you basically remove smoke from the air by smoking a cigarette backwards.
Right.
And putting it back in the pack, which, I mean, it's a little bit clever, but it's not. It doesn't have the same humorous effect that a lot of his humor does. It doesn't work.
And I think if Ballard had written this book, he wouldn't have worried about like the nitty gritties, the ins and outs. He would have just let it. Yeah, it would have just been like, but I don't know that Ballard would have written this book. But my first thought was to try and think about other writers and how they would handle this like concept. And because I think Dick, we've talked many times in this podcast that his humor is underrated, but in this regard, I think he's trying too hard.
Yeah.
Funny. With the Sogum pipes and the whiskers and it's all, and the cutesy goodbyes, hellos and all that. It doesn't work for me. It's one of the things that makes this book just not work for me is that he's trying.
It's really shallow surface sort of ideas when he's trying to convey like the depth of humanity, what is in the afterlife, and then he says, we say goodbye when we say hello. Bleh! It just doesn't match.
No.
Yeah, and if you did more of the blending where there's some people going forward and some people going back, I think you could have some really horrifying moments where somebody suddenly starts going backwards, like in the middle of something, and how horrifying and terrifying that would be. Like how some people are, people with seizure disorders who are worried that at any time, like they're worried about driving because at any time they could suddenly have a seizure. Yeah, and if you could have a situation where people could just suddenly like start going backwards in time, that could be really terrifying. And
that's one of the things about this book that it misses is that it doesn't do any of this interesting stuff. We never get any of the POV from the Anarch Peak's point of view of him coming back to life, which would have been much more interesting than just watching Joseph Tinbane get murdered by the kids from the Brood in a hotel, albeit cool, but
Tinbane died.
I do like that he's like, hey kids, put away those weapons. Oh shit.
And then they obliterate him with laser guns. Yeah.
I did like that Tim Bane died because I didn't.
God, I hated that guy.
Yeah. But
there's a fascinating novel by Martin Amis called Time's Arrow, which is a much better
I
attempt.
read about that one. I want to read that one.
I've read that. It's a much better attempt at trying to tell a life story in reverse.
Yeah.
He chooses a German who participated in the Holocaust and then fled to Argentina and lived the rest of his life anonymously. So you begin with this immensely old man being revived on a hospital bed, and then his entire life is presented in reverse. It's done very skillfully. Every single implication from murder to pooping is actually thought through and presented.
Yeah, I want to read. I definitely want to read that one.
yeah, because this done very
More than ever. But when I looked up reversed realities when I was researching this book, and that really there was a lot of stuff, but that book was the only one that really impressed me that it might be good enough to look into.
There's a lot of interesting things happening in that book. Yeah.
I mean, the movie Irreversible is fantastic, but
Very different in tone.
it's very different in tone. But it is.
But it is very well done. Yes, I agree.
Reverse, but
So one of the things that we didn't talk about is the term "oldborn," which because that to me that term kind of confused things because it was like it's kind of the idea that they're being born that way versus that they've already been alive and they're the dead coming back. So I thought that term was a little confusing.
I liked Oldborn.
I just like it. I'm just saying it confused me a little bit. But on page 9, those who were presently being oldborn had been the last to die. Final mortalities before June of 86. But according to Alex Hobart, the reversal of time would continue to move backwards, continually sweeping out at a greater span. Earlier and still earlier deaths would be reversed, and in 2,000 years from now, Paul himself would sleep, as he himself had put it. So it's this idea that it starts small and it's expanding, but there's a mention later on about going to Mars because it's Philip K. Dick novel, so someone's going to want to go to Mars. And but the Hobart phase only is happening on Earth. It has nothing to do with Mars. It's not happening there. And so it gets into the theological issues of, is this something that's happening to Earth specifically?
Well, isn't it in the short story where he talks about it being a man-made sort of process?
Right, and it's more just discovered.
Or it has to do with this new goal or whatever it is that that character is supposed to be eradicating.
Yeah, I believe in the short story, it's something man-made or an accident or something, and in the novel, it's more left up to interpretation. And it says here that this is a process. It also says on page 10 that it's a process that happens every couple million years. So it's this idea that there's a cycle going on. It's one line, and it's almost a throwaway, but I did highlight it because I did notice the whole thing about it happening every few billion years. So he's kind of in this idea that it's a cycle, and I think he's trying to say something about life.
Yeah, but he lets it go right there. It's just like when Tinbane gets upset about being told he's aging backwards. He gets irate and yells at whatever character he's talking to, but it never comes up again.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's pretty common to PKD, is to like early on introduce ideas and then drop them.
Yeah, I had a very strong sense of that in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that by the end he was writing a slightly different book from the one he was writing in the beginning.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why I talked about it like it was a heist book, or it was it was going to end in a shoot 'em up with all these different groups, but
Somehow that fizzles out, and and like you said, all the bad plans,
Mhm.
they just sort of cancel each other out. So I think what we're given to believe is that Anarch Peak's revelations about the afterlife are sort of the core of the book.
Yeah.
And even before Anarch Peak is revived, Sebastian talks a little bit about his afterlife, though he finds it very difficult to remember it. And he talks about a voice, which I assume is meant to be the voice of God. And it's so huge, and he is so small.
Mhm.
And later on, just before he warns Anne that, hey, the UD people are coming to kill you, they have this quick theological exchange, which he says, oh, this is all just Plato and Plotinus and Spinoza regurgitated all over again.
Right.
So I think the revelation that he's trying to build all this around is that there is an immortal soul, and we're all kind of one at some level. And this was supposed to be confirmed by the Anarch Peak coming back and telling it to his people.
But like Anthony says, we never get to see that. We never get to see.
We never get to see that. It's thwarted. It's obviously the library doesn't want that to happen, though I'm not sure why, except that they're determined to be the chief power of the world at that point in time. So
but I like the philosophy of, breaking down reality. I mean, a lot of religions do this, like Buddhism, Taoism, Transcendentalism. There's a lot of religions that, or sects or philosophies that say, everything around us, everything that we care about doesn't matter, because it all comes down to this little nugget of what we are, this soul, and I liked that aspect, but he never expands on it.
So,
he never gets to it.
On page 141 of the Mariner edition, the robot, Carl Jr., which we can talk more about in a bit, the robot says, the real issue is spiritual. We must determine and agree on the precise moment at which the soul enters the corpse in the ground. Is it the moment when it is dug up, when its voice is heard from below asking for aid, when the first heartbeat is recorded, when all brain tissue has formed? In the opinion of the UD, the soul enters the corpse when there is total tissue regeneration. And so I think, and the fact that the Anarch was illegally dug up brings up these issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's uncomfortable because of the way the debate in the American public has gone over about when life begins and doesn't begin.
Sure.
But I think that these are some of the uncomfortable things that are going on in this novel when you're talking about like what the issue of the soul is, which is really what it comes down to. And then I think it becomes an interesting thing because, and this comes down to James Peake's life being cut short and not being able to give Dick the answers that he wanted. Anarch Peak is brought back, but he doesn't have the answers,
But he does. He might have the answers.
Well, yes, but we're not. They're not.
He gets to give them.
Yeah, we're not going to listen to them because we're too busy infighting about who controls the answers.
Right. So another thing that's weird about, and some synergy with other PKD material is let's talk for a little bit about the Free Negro Municipality. So JP brought it up in the sense that it was foreseeing a lot of this that was going on. I thought it was interesting this book quoted Malcolm X at one point, or quoted the existence of Malcolm.
No, more than once.
Yes.
More than once.
Calling him a modern Malcolm X. Remember reading about him? He preached violence and got violence in return, which is kind of
That is.
Productive way of talking about Malcolm X, but
Yeah, I
Sort
wasn't
of
really
backed away
happy
quickly from that
wrote
passage.
that.
Yeah.
but we've got that going on. But then with the free, one thing that's interesting about the Free Negro Municipality is that in season 4 of Man in the High Castle, that basically happens.
Oh,
Yeah, and I wondered how much of that was people being kind of. I don't know if that was an accident or whatever, but the Black Radicals become like a huge part of season 4 of Man in the High Castle. It's one of the things that actually, in my opinion,
I would assume an intent there, not an accident.
right. And so what happens in Man in the High Castle in season 4, and I don't think this is a big spoiler because it happens early in the season, is that Fred Hampton and the Panthers become like revolutionaries fighting against the Japanese. And I'm not going to go into. I guess I kind of gave away the fact that they basically are able to kick the Japanese out towards the end of season 4, and the reason why I think that that's really interesting, and that's partially because the Chinese are overtaxed with their war in China, right? Which makes sense in this alternate history. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this free Negro municipality is that I think Dick is looking at this idea that the black people of this future are gonna be over it, right? That they're gonna want their own system, that they're gonna want their civil rights, and they're not gonna want to be a part of that. And that's one of the things that's so sad about what we're dealing with societally right now, is that we're still dealing with the issues of the racist police and the systematic racist police force, and we're still dealing with that. And I think Dick was looking at this idea that with this free Negro municipality is that these black radicals are going to have their revolution at some point. And
yet their money is worthless
Outside of their territory.
outside of their territory, which
Right.
I found kind of an interesting side note.
right.
Is that where there's this support for black society, black rights, all that, yet it's still outside of that area means nothing.
Right. And yeah, and there's a tension because in the later season of Man in the High Castle, the Nazi Germany is still controlling the East Coast, and all of a sudden there's like these black radicals running a communist country on the West Coast of the United States. And and the idea of it is at first, because like some of the Nazis are like, well, should we just ignore them or do we deal with them? Right. And I think that what Dick's doing here is, and he mentions it because he has like the NRP. You mentioned this too, JP, with the Watts riots and the mention of the gatherings at Dodger Stadium for NRP, that there's so many interesting ideas on the edge here about like what this culture is. These are things that I liked about the novel. These are elements and little fun things that I wish could be expanded. And unfortunately for me, the problem is the whole thing of just the concept just not working. It's like, I think you've got a really nice car with no engine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think PKD is like pushing it down the road, but it's not humming. And that and to me that's the problem with this idea is like, yeah, that's a really cool concept. And yes, there's LSD grenades, which is fun and cool. And there are cool societal like world building moments. I like the fact that on page 3, there's a mention the firm. Of course, there's small business. Like you're talking about it as a heist, but I see it as Dick always has like a small business struggling to survive, right? And so here, the firm occupied a small wooden rented building which had survived World War III and even portions of World War IV. I like that World War III and IV have happened and we don't really know much about it. I like the little details there. There's all kinds of fun stuff there.
It's meaningless because there is no difference in society because of the wars.
Right.
Well, I mean, the US has splintered into four nations at minimum,
Yeah, so
which
that is the concept.
presumably has something to do with these Third and Fourth World Wars.
No, but it's clearly blamed on the Udi religion.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the wars were a factor. They might have been, but we're not told that.
I believe it's part of that, and then the race riots, and it's on page 90 and 91 of the Mariner edition. How pandering to the paroles, as he'll try to do, will bring about more riots, more civil disobedience, not only in the free Negro municipality, but here among Negroes and the white pro-Negroes on the West Coast. Don't forget Watts and Oakland and Detroit. Don't forget what you learned in school.
Yeah.
So I think that the riots were a huge part of it. And it's funny that he's saying, don't forget what you learned in school. And they're talking to an ERAD who's basically like about to obliterate knowledge. And he's like, don't forget what you learned in school, but let's destroy the information. And then there he's talking about doing a complete ERAD job on God in a Box, a book.
By Anna Peak.
The Anarch Peaks book, yeah. So, yeah, there's really interesting things going on here, but in the end, I don't know. So
Nothing associates, nothing comes together, everything is spread out and weird. And
like, I don't know what...
weird in a good way.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what the FNM's vision for society is. I don't know this grand unification that they're supposedly planning for, but it just seems to come and go without much happening.
Well, Robert's power play made sense to me in our modern society. I was thinking, all right, so Roberts wants Peak dead, so he can continue to be in charge and bend the FNM to what he wants.
Yes.
But then when we find out he doesn't want him dead,
yeah,
and he's hoping for a change in the perception of reality in general, due to what the Anarch people say, then it becomes even more convoluted.
Yeah, because there's a certain implication there that he's actually an utopian who wants this sense of oneness. But oh gosh, trying to unpack what's happening there is so difficult.
Right.
And I was also startled when Tinbane dies, because just gone.
Yeah.
I'm fine with characters dying in a story, but it just felt like, what was he there for, even
to begin with?
yeah.
I feel like he was there only to make Sebastian's infidelity seem like, okay, we both kind of did it, so that's really what he feels like he's there for.
Yeah, sort of to make PKD feel good about himself.
Right. So for every single bad mistake Sebastian makes, in a few chapters, someone will come back and say, well, it was okay you did that because of this. Or his inner monologue will be, oh, it was okay I did that because of this. It was like you're going back to the fact that he doesn't save the Anarch Peak. Even after they're like, don't go look for your wife, save him. And he just blows right by it. And he's like, I'm not saving you. And then in the next chapter, it becomes, oh, well, it was fine because X. It's just making excuses for his shitty decision making.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Are there any themes I missed overall, like just before we get into our final reviews, which are going to be fun?
Well, I found it interesting that the library, which works in real life as a means of disseminating information, connecting people to resources, is here dedicated to enabling the process of losing knowledge.
Of destruction. Yeah.
Of destruction. I found it interesting, but I found it without a foundation.
Yeah.
Why? I don't get any idea of motivation.
Right.
Right.
This whole book lacks clear motivations. Especially if it is more a philosophical novel than a science fiction novel. You want a clearer bead on people's ideologies.
Sure.
And apart from Anarch Peak, nobody really seems to have a clear-cut ideology.
Mm-hmm.
You know how
That, I think, is why it felt like a mess ultimately more than anything else. It's a battle of ideas, but I don't know what the ideas are.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, the fundamental ideas where they
Do you
come
guys think that's because Dick oftentimes is conflicted in his own right with his own personal ideology?
That's a really good explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, Anthony, and I think that's a really good point. I think he is confused a lot of the time. I mean, we know from his comments that you can't take anything that he says about. He'll say at one point
anything.
Yeah, he'll say, "This is the worst book I ever wrote," and then the next quote you'll find from it will be like, he'll say like, "Time Out of Joint is a total piece of crap," and then the next quote is, "I think Time Out of Joint will be my book that will be remembered forever." And,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Another thing I found interesting was that towards the end, Sebastian says, "Oh, I think Anarch Peak was the greatest person that ever lived apart from Gandhi."
Yeah. He compares him directly to Gandhi.
Yeah. And also Anne Fisher, the femme fatale from the library, words I never thought I would combine in a sentence, says, well, if his philosophy was true, then it doesn't matter because it's going to come out anyway. Which sort of undermines all the urgency around everyone fighting for possession of Peak.
Right. Well,
this strange book.
Well,
a bit of an undercooked book probably, which is why we're finding so much that's not really tracking when we try to unravel it.
Probably about 5 more years to gestate, to become a real idea.
Yeah.
Because it's really not there at this point. It's
and we know that he'd already previously written. Hadn't he already written Man in the High Castle by this point?
Oh yeah, for years.
And Dr. Blood Money?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we know that it's not just that he was trying to find his feet as a writer. He has successfully put together more conceptually coherent novels by this point.
To me, lazy.
Yes.
Yeah. And I will say, Jay, that you brought up the issue of like the lack of motivation for the library. That was huge for me, and I found myself, and and you guys know this as being when you read a bad book as a writer, a lot of times you're trying to fix it in your head what's going on. And I spent a lot of time trying to think about the motivation of the ERADs and the library, and I started thinking that was the more interesting book was. And then I thought, well, it's kind of And then I thought, well, it's kind of Fahrenheit 451,
Sure.
to a degree, and because it was funny.
Unintended.
Yeah, when I was reading this, I started writing down notes saying like, oh, there's an idea here. And I started writing down this concept that I was coming up with about the ERADs and going on. And then I just looked at it and I was like, oh, it's just Fahrenheit 451. And then I just deleted it. I
just wanted to just briefly read out such an interesting exchange towards the end of the book. This is when everyone's plans have fallen apart. And somehow Sebastian has gone home again, and somehow he finds time to fall asleep, and he has a dream about Anarch Peak. And I heard you calling, the Anarch said. So I dropped what I had been doing and came to give aid. What can I do for you? Do you want to know the year? It is 4 BC. Why? Sebastian asked. What does that signify? He felt that it portended something vast. He felt awe. The Anarch said, you are the savior of mankind. Through it you will be redeemed. You are the most important person ever born. What do I have to do, Sebastian said, to redeem mankind? You must die again, the Anarch answered. That is such a fascinating passage. And we never get to know what it meant. Do we? I mean, guys, help me out here.
No, it never gets addressed.
Yeah, that is such a powerful passage. I started thinking, wow, we're going to have an 11th hour save. This book is suddenly going to open out into something. But it didn't.
And then it just just flat out ends.
Yeah. And that is such good writing too. It really made you feel, oh, the threads are going to come together.
The only thing that dream sequence does is lead to the other vision.
Yes. Right at the very end, yeah.
But that's it. I mean, it has no...
And I really found this idea of the spectral Anarch peak turning up so interesting. It reminded me a little of, in the Bible, which obviously Philip K. Dick has also read a lot. After the crucifixion, Christ turns up in this cafe where Thomas asks, are you really him? There are a couple of visions of Jesus that appear before people, and they think it's just a vision, but then he says, no, it's me in the flesh. And I felt this was an interesting sort of inversion of that, because he tries to touch Anarch Peak and his hand passes through him. That's interesting, even at his most scattered, Dick can put in these interesting resonances into his books.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyways, let's get into reviews so we can start wrapping things up. I'll start by giving it 2 Sogum pipes up the butt out of 5. And that's as many Sogum pipes up the butt as I can fit for this book. I wanted to like it. I like the themes. I love talking about it. I've enjoyed the conversation. Again, and I would put this with, I wouldn't say it's as bad. It's not as bad as Cosmic Puppets for me. That's still the low bar for PKD.
Is Cosmic Puppets the one that ends with Ahura Mazda and what's his face sort of towering over this little American town?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. Oh, good Lord. I remember not knowing what was happening there either. Yeah.
That's our universal least favorite PKD as far as Cosmic Puppets.
Right.
But so I wouldn't say this is as bad as Cosmic Puppets, but it's close. And it probably has the same star rating as Cosmic Puppets, but I'd still say this is significantly better than that because
I think you gave Cosmic Puppets a 4.
Oh.
No, I took it down.
Just fucking with you, David.
Are you sure? Did you look it up? Because I think I gave it 2.
Yeah, 2.
2. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with 2. Anthony,
I gave the Kraken Space 1.
You gave Kraken Space 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Kraken Space more than you did. So
Holy shit! I don't even remember Kraken Space. I forgot we read that one. I'm gonna give it. I'll probably give it 2 confusing, made-up manifestos. Just because out of 5. I don't. It's not. It's bad. It's as bad as the Cosmic Puppets, but for different things. It's not a competently written book. It reads more like a book of a ton of different ideas with characters who reflect those ideologies in some way or another, but we don't get any breathing room to explore, like Jay was saying, the ideologies or the characters for a lot of the book. And I think that there are more interesting characters than being given the typical Dick bumbling, boring businessman protagonist, which is exactly what we get here. And we get that in a lot of his books, and at this point we've read, how many have we read? A lot. I think that it's a huge misstep kind of sit back with your typical Dick characters when we have Anarch Peak, even the elderly woman who's resurrected at the beginning of the book, and we could explore these people within this world more, I think would have been a better idea.
And there's even a guy that is resurrected right before Anarch Peak.
Oh, yeah.
And an older woman too. Older woman too.
No.
Mhm.
I mean, not days before, but moments before.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And the only thing I truly thought was kind of funny, aside from smoking up your butt and turning it into food, is they do kind of treat the Bible like it's a magic 8-ball, because she is just standing there saying, "Oh yeah, I just look at it and I'll pick a passage and I'll read it," which I don't know if the Dick was intentionally making fun of how people do utilize the Bible in that way, but I thought that was kind
actually, I remember in the 80s and the 70s.
People do that.
Yeah, people used to.
I've heard of this.
They used to believe in like this cosmic luck of picking the right thing, and it was very popular among adults, not teenagers, but adults.
And don't forget that Philip K. Dick supposedly composed The Man on the High Castle with the aid of the Yi Jing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So cartomancy is sort of something that is on his mind from time to time. And that was quite an interesting passage, and it is one of the lighter, sort of more dynamic scenes of dialogue in the book.
Well, because
It's basically Sebastian and his wife, right?
Tinbane has a totally different interpretation.
Oh yes, it's Tinbane and Lotta. Yeah.
Of the passages she reads.
Yeah,
And
he does.
Basically, this is your mind interpreting what you read, not the passage itself. It's your interpretation.
All right, so JP, what's your final rating of this book?
Well, I'm always tempted to be kind and give everything a minimum of 3, but I think I will go with 2 out of 5 because it doesn't come together well enough. And yet there's enough in it that it's not a total washout. Like, I have to admire the sheer intellectual audacity of Dick, even in a novel like this where he's maybe sort of rushing through it, half-assing it, that he will just dump in passages of fairly abstruse theological discussion in the middle of the novel, and these are important things to him, which I think is one of the qualities that we go back to his novels for, that he is so earnest and sincere about his philosophical themes. He is trying to think through the basic nature of humanity, of identity, of reality, and that seriousness is present even in a relatively minor PKD novel like this one. But will it ever be in my top 5 or top 10 PKD novels? I doubt it.
Yeah, it's definitely
not me.
Yeah.
Yeah, not me.
Yeah, for sure. Langhorne.
All right, because you all picked 2, I'm going 1.5.
This is not The Price is Right. This is not the.
I'm going minimum bid. 1.5. I don't know. Eradicated theses.
Eradicated books.
Theses.
Theses. Right.
What is the plural of thesis?
I believe it's theses.
Theses. Eradicated theses. All right. Interesting. Okay.
All right. So,
final question before.
Can I explain?
Yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
Goddamn, David. So I first of all, I judge things. I go 1 to 5, basically 1 or 0, if such a thing exists, means you did not write a novel. It is not cohesive enough to be a novel. This is dangerously dangerously close to not being a novel. It might be a collection of ideas loosely based around one thing, but it is dangerously close to not making any cohesive sense. And there are no characters which often I can be fine with, as long as there are characters to hate. There are no characters to hate. There are no characters to feel about. You're just disappointed by everything. Other than the characters we see for like 5 seconds. There is a goddamn psychic priest in this novel.
Yes.
A psychic priest. And yet we see him for 5 seconds. That is the most interesting character in the whole thing. And then there's a surly tech guy. I mean, come on. Give us the people we are interested in.
Well, and I would love a whole novel set in the free Negro municipality, right? Like,
sure. I would like to, like Anthony says, hear what the Anarch Peak had to say. I would like all kinds of things from this novel, but it doesn't give us any of those things. It talks about shitty library people and shitty regular people. So, yeah, 1.5. This might be my least favorite because I have to admit, there are times, there were pages where I was like, all right, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'll read 2 sentences and go into the next page. So I did that for like 15, 20 pages through this because it was just awful. Awful.
okay, so that's pretty hardcore. So,
All right.
Larry, you think you can fix this as a movie?
Yeah, this is a good movie. I mean, you have a flawed main character. You have a femme fatale. You have several evils. I mean, I basically wrote it down. The first half of this is a Tarantino-esque heist movie or MacGuffin movie, as we used to call them, because basically everyone's after the same goal. Find this guy, you know? So
find where he's buried.
first half is taken care of. Introduce all your factions, introduce your team. You know, this is an action movie. And you can put the philosophy along the way, but it's an action movie. It's a Tarantino-esque action movie where in the finale, this brilliant man somehow disarms a giant battle that has been going on. That's how I see it.
So the idea is that the whole thing centers around saving Anarch Peak, and then he's able to like stop everything in the end. Like,
Sure.
Yeah. So do you have any ideas on who
his philosophy with his, beatificness?
Do you have a dream director or writer or any of that?
I mean, I think Guy Ritchie would be good for something like that. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the guy that did Smoking Aces, but that guy would be good. The guy that did what?
Joe Carnahan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like, obviously, this wouldn't be my first choice of pick to adapt for PKD, but I do agree with you. You could fix a lot of the problems. I think that if you're more focusing on the resurrection thing, just like I wouldn't make it faithful at all in that sense. But if you're going to do if you're going to do like the biological time reversal thing, I would focus it much more on the biological than having any of the other stuff. Or do what I was talking about earlier, which is turn it into much more of a horror set piece where it's like epilepsy, where it's a thing that doesn't happen to everyone, that it's like something that can kind of just occur to you, and that there might be some like congenital reason why they know Anarch Peak is coming back. Like
I feel like that's a much harder thing to film, because you got to go backwards, forwards.
Yeah.
Much more intense than I was thinking, but
Yeah.
it worked.
I don't really have a director or writer in mind per se, but and this would be low on my list if I was ESP, like trying to figure out which Dick properties to adapt. However, if they wanted to ask us to do it, I would do it. Yeah. That being said, Anthony or JP, either of you guys have any ideas for how you would fix this as a film?
Gaspar, no way.
Go ahead, Jay.
I think it could actually be a good mini-series.
Oh, yeah?
Because you'd have time to flesh out more of the ideas. I would remove some of the more gross aspects of the time reversal, because they just detract from both the action and the philosophy.
Yeah, they don't.
I just don't know how you can make that gel with the mood of a serious or serious/exciting action / philosophy mini-series. I would be really interested to have Zal Batmanglij and Britt Marling do it. They're the ones who made OA.
Oh, the OA, yeah.
OA and the movie Sound of My Voice and Another Earth.
All right.
So they're able to do this kind of slow-burning, intellectually challenging, sci-fi-ish thing. And I'd be very interested to see what they do with it.
Nice.
I'd be very.
And like I said, maybe a mini-series more than a feature film.
I'd be interested to see the production design meeting where they designed the Sogum pipes.
Oh, cool.
No Sogum pipes. There's no
Sogum
Sogum pipes.
There will be no disgorging and engorging.
Yeah, that would still be an interesting meeting. Like, so
Yeah,
we're going to design what?
If we're gonna do this,
Anthony.
I'm somewhere between Larry and Jay on it. I don't have a director in mind, but I agree that a miniseries would be better because you would have time to explore these characters and even maybe throw in a couple new ones that are either combinations of other characters that we get in here that aren't nearly as fleshed out, or just a couple new ones, and explore, what it means to be reverse, like resurrected, and kind of, if the Anarch Peak is this kind of a messiah, what does he see that's different than the other people that have been resurrected, right? So, like, why is he more important than someone else? And focus on
get that from the novel, is that he has such a clear vision of what he saw when he was dead.
Oh, and then they never tell us what that is.
Yeah.
So I would say that they say he has a clear vision, but we get no indication of what that is.
But you have that to work from.
Sure. And I think I might nix the husband and wife relationship, and one of them sleeping with this woman from this one's faction, and his wife is wanting to bang out with the cop. It's very PKD. I'm working through my divorce melodrama that I think does the story a disservice, when, as I've said a million times already, all the interesting characters are the characters that are on the periphery of what's going on.
The team, the people in the library, those are the,
Yeah.
Right, and it's not like
the child operatives.
Yeah.
The library could be a really, really interesting and creepy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they reminded me of the kids from The Brood. And also, just to kind of think about it, like, what is it like to be in the mind of a character who knows that they're slowly de-aging and are going to end up back in a womb?
I mean, you have a Flowers for Algernon kind of situation here, where
Mhm.
everyone knows they're going to get dumb. Everyone knows
They're going to
Yeah.
become more
at
childish.
age they're going to get stupider and younger and eventually be children. I mean, that fundamentally
Yeah.
is a
And,
movie.
and psychologically, what does that do to you?
Yeah.
You know, that is far and away more interesting to me than anything Dick does in this book. So it's a lot of stuff he alludes to, but he never explores it.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah, I guess in that sense, that's where you really could benefit from having a TV series and to be really able to extend it. And
yeah,
if
you can take a whole episode and just concentrate on one person that is coming to that age where they know they're going to be stupid, and they know they're going to be young and dumb.
either that, or you have really precocious kids who like have the intelligence of having lived a long life. And
Oh, but imagine having to deal with a
No,
bunch of 8-year-olds with
that's not how
dementia.
this reality works, David. You don't retain any knowledge.
that's true. That's true.
So mark it down. That's 2 now that we'd turn into a miniseries instead of a movie.
Yeah, right.
The first
other
being
one?
the 3 stigmata.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the 2. Yeah. Well, and we'd much rather see 3 stigmata.
Honestly, I do both now. I'm into both.
I mean, this one would work. That's what I'm saying. It would work.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think building off the heist too of like of not just Anarch Peak, but looking for very specific people who you can profit from,
Sure.
like finding different dead people.
I mean, and in that way, you could come up with an entire series.
Yeah.
Is just finding the right people, whatever, episode to episode, different people you save.
And then
It'd be like
the spiritual questions. You
but
could have
really, really dark.
you have one person on the team who all they care about is finding the right people to make profit, and then you have another person on the team whose spiritual quest is for the answer. And that's where you get into the themes. Yeah. And then
See, that's the problem with this, is the potential is almost endless.
yeah.
But what we got was terrible.
Yeah, but it isn't endless. This podcast.
This episode.
Yeah. So
What are we doing next?
we are doing the Ganymede Takeover.
You got that one?
All right. Oh, wait. Is there 2 authors for this?
There are Ray Nelson, the They Live guy.
All right. Earth has been taken over by a strange alien force, creatures whose instinct for survival overrides any human resistance. Then, a vital weapon, with the power of electronically warping the mind, falls into the hands of a terrorist group still strong enough to oppose the aliens, a weapon so powerful that it cannot be controlled. The control of Earth is in the balance, and the balance is a terrifyingly precarious one. So I guess we're going back to space pirates.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going back to space. JP, thank you for coming and being a part.
It was good to have you on the show.
Yeah, really enjoyed your input.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun and super interesting.
Right, so, and as we always say, stay paranoid, keep it paranoid, dickheads.
Be paranoid.
Goodbye.
Always paranoid.